Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Mic Check Podcast. I'm T-Word People's Champ. Thanks for tuning in. Go ahead and like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Errol Spence Jr., the unified welterweight champion in boxing, and some recent news that came out over the weekend. So, as many of you know, if you're boxing fans, most of you know, he has Man Down Promotions. He's a promoter of lightweight contender Frank Martin at 135 pounds. He's been with Errol Spence for, I believe, right around a year now. Um, and he also works with Errol Spence trainer Derek James. So over the weekend, they were all at Frank Martin's fight against Michelle Rivera, which he won by unanimous decision in a dominating fashion. And before the fight started, Errol Spence appeared on the Showtime broadcast talking to Brian Custer, and a few jewels were dropped regarding his position and the situation with him potentially fighting Terence Crawford, or what he's going to do just in general, like what's next for him. The first thing I want to talk about, I mentioned this in the previous video, but I want to go more in depth and just kind of, I've had time to sit with the information, so I've processed it and I've come to a few conclusions or a few opinions that I want to share with you all and also get your opinion. So the first thing he shared was his perspective on dealing with Terence Crawford and how the situation played out. As we all know, during negotiations towards the end, before it completely broke down, word leaked that Terence Crawford was going to be taking another fight on a different network. And then he eventually left and went over to BLK Prime to fight David Avanesian on December 10th. This news came out around October 7th or 8th. So it was about 2 months in between where there had just been a whole lot of speculation leading up to his fight with David. So everybody was just wondering, like, how did it go wrong? There was a back and forth Twitter blow up between the fighters, and then eventually it just stopped. Terence went on to start doing this media tour to get ready for his fight. Errol Spence kind of started just posting random stuff on Twitter, talking about taking vacations, hanging out with his kids, things like that. Just normal stuff, I guess anybody else would do on social media, but he really just kind of stopped talking about the fight. Anytime he was asked about it, he would just say, I don't know, or he just, just kind of be real nonchalant. He did have something cooking, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but he just wasn't giving any clues, while everybody else in the boxing world and surrounding the boxing world, the boxing community, were speculating about what was next. Was it Keith Thurman? Was he fighting Boots, Stanionis, some other unknown contender, or somebody that wasn't in the main conscious of boxing? There's just a lot of things. He had basically three people lined up for mandatories, and then you have Virgil Ortiz orbiting the situation too, out there on the WBO side. So these guys started to align themselves into their own fights. Stanionis and Ortiz eventually went into a purse bid for a fight, which Golden Boy Promotions, Ortiz promoter, won. And then Boots Ennis, he went on ahead and signed on to fight Karen Chizutskian for the IBF interim title. And then Keith Thurman was basically elevated into number one contender and then mandatory status for the WBC. So all roads led to Thurman for Errol Spence, since he wasn't going to be fighting Terence Crawford, because he had to satisfy at least one of those mandatories. Eventually, TGB Promotions, on Spence's behalf, requested the WBA make Thurman his mandatory, so he will be able to satisfy two mandatories at once. This is based on research. I wasn't told this by someone else. This is just basic reading. You can find this information on Google if you do desire to verify. So that's what we were thinking. Fast forward to Saturday night, again, before Frank Martin's fight, Errol's doing an interview, and he's talking to BC, and he's telling them, he just wished Crawford had gone about things differently, because he was a little blindsided by the fact that they weren't going to be fighting. And if he had just told him, hey, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go fight this other guy, and then I'm going to get this money, and then I'll come back, and then we can get it on. One thing I will say that he's maintained throughout the discussions, Terence Crawford has said he told everybody from the beginning he did want to fight this year. I think the issue lies in a little bit of miscommunication. There's a difference between saying you want to fight this year, meaning if I'm negotiating with you, do everything you can to get me a date this year, versus if you can't get me a date this year, I definitely have something, lined up in the backdrop. I don't think that's what happened. And that's what pissed Errol Spence off. It sounds like, I mean, he's trying to be cordial and be a professional about it, but you could tell it pissed him off and irritated him a little bit that he's not going to be fighting Terence Crawford. So I think that was just a bit of miscommunication. These guys are boxers. They're not media people. They're not marketers. They're not interviewers or whatever the case may be. They are talented people who've made a lot of money off their talent. That doesn't give them the greatest business acumen, and that's not a knock on them. Everybody has their specialty, and obviously negotiation isn't the specialty for Errol or Terence. So that being said, you can't necessarily lay blame on one person, but you could definitely see that there was a lack of communication from one side, which also led to some hard-headedness from the other side. Now, moving forward, Errol was like, but yo, we can still get it in. He said, but Brian Custer asked him about, how's he doing after the accident that he had on the night of Terence Crawford's fight. And he let it be known that he didn't come out unscathed. He got banged up. This is his second, looks like a major accident. It's not as severe as the first that we know of, but the front end of that truck was smashed, and he was able to walk away from it. Everybody was safe, but he didn't come out without being battered and a little bruised. He's got a visible limp. There's a couple interviews that you can see on YouTube where they're trying to follow him as he walks, and his gait is just different. If you go back and look at the interviews, like when he was at the Rolling fight in May, and then you look at the way he's walking in this one, that ain't a pimp limp. Something's wrong. I did speculate. This is pure speculation. In the previous video, I speculated that Errol Spence had a more severe injury than he was letting on. And I have a personal training background. Actually, it's what I do for a living in my real life. And I'm thinking it could be a micro tear, something that's just causing discomfort. He's still pretty fresh. I mean, these injuries, I fell a few weeks ago, tripped on something and stumbled. And I was banged up for about 3 weeks off it. Thankfully, I didn't tear anything. So I can imagine if there's actually a micro tear, how much it can affect him being able to walk, eventually run, which is a significant part of training. So in my opinion, I think that's going to impact his fight date. And he gave a roundabout, he said May or June, maybe April. So I'm going to go with the middle and say he's probably looking at May to return. Terence Crawford talked about April or May. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise, so to speak, but I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to say it's a coincidence that may favor this fight getting done, because if Terence is going to be taking a breather, recouping, he just had a fight in December, take the first 3 months of the year off, going to camp around end of February, beginning of March, something like that, take the first 2 months of the year off. That'll be 3 months out the ring for him, and then he'll have time to do a longer camp if he chooses to get ready for Errol. Spence will be on the mend, and then he'll be able to start his camp around the same time for a late April, early May date. And outside of like Cinco de Mayo, which Canelo Alvarez has on lock, they could get an early May date the very next weekend or mid-May, which would be a really good time. Both of them are healthy. In a way, I've heard some people saying it doesn't sound like Errol wants him to be first coming off the injury, but that pushes this fight into the end of next year. And if it's not done by June, if they don't have a date, they don't have a signed contract to fight in June, no later than like right before 4th of July or right after 4th of July, the fight's not going to happen. But I do believe that things are aligning for these two gentlemen to get in the ring and sell other things with yayo fisticuffs and make something happen. But that's the update on this one. I do believe that this is all played out to allow them to actually fight, because now their timelines line up. Because if you think about it this way, if Spence was healthy, he was going to give an announcement either during media day for Frank Martin's fight, like at the press conference, do an announcement because he works for Showtime, PBC, and all that stuff, or maybe the day of the fight he was going to give an announcement. And that means that he probably was going to be fighting like in February, because the January dates are kind of set. So if he had a February date, that means you got to take a couple months off. That puts him in the ring like late June, returning, and Terence Crawford would have already wanted to be back in the ring. Now, if he doesn't have to fight top of the year, he could jump on the mend, fully recover, and then the next thing you know, he's back in the ring in April or May, fighting the WBO champ to get undisputed or battle for undisputed. It's still 50-50 fight in my mind. I favor Errol for a few different reasons. And the longer it takes to get there, the more I favor him, because even though he's battered, he does have youth on the side, and that motor Terence is a little older. We don't know what that motor looks like late into fights because he's just not getting there. He's knocking dudes out fairly early. So we just don't know what that will look like. But no need to analyze right now because I need to see what both these fighters going to look like in 6 months when they probably get in the ring. So that's going to be it for today. This has been a little update on Errol Spence and the Terence Crawford fight. This is your boy T-Word, the People's Champ, the Mic Check Podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with a friend. Let them share it with a friend. Until the next time, I'm out of here. Peace.